Inside the beehive, political power usually requires a mandate. You campaign, you win your electorate, and your constituents hold you accountable. But right now, one of the most powerful ministers in the country is shaping the justice system without ever having won a local seat. For 15 years, Paul Goldsmith has entered Parliament through the National Party list. He has campaigned repeatedly in the Epsom electorate, and voters there have consistently chosen someone else. His political survival relies on party rankings and internal dynamics, rather than direct ballot box victories. Recently, that internal dynamic shifted. After Chris Pank was stripped of his portfolios following a failed leadership challenge, a massive power vacuum opened up in the cabinet. Goldsmith absorbed Pank's responsibilities, adding Defense, the GCSB, and the SIS to his existing roles. He now holds a staggering 11 ministerial portfolios. One unelected list MP simultaneously controls justice, treaty negotiations, media, and the public service. When a single official dictates the rules for the courts, the media regulators, and the foundational treaty all at once, the potential for sweeping legislative changes is vast. To understand how this consolidation of power is actually being used, we have to look past the political rhetoric and follow the institutional receipts. The government recently launched the Treaty Clauses Review, a plan to downgrade references to Te Tiriti o Waitangi across 19 different laws, so they require nothing more than to take into account treaty principles. The official justification for this rollback is that it provides legal certainty. This diagram illustrates the Ministry of Justice's assessment. Officials laid out 5 options, explicitly warning that the chosen 5th option, downgrading every clause, was not preferred. They noted a lack of evidence for improving certainty and bluntly warned of significant risk to the Maori-Crown relationship. Despite those warnings, the government pushed ahead. The entire justification for overriding the advisory group and altering 19 laws rested heavily on a single sentence in a cabinet paper: Goldsmith's personal opinion that stronger provisions do not promote balanced consideration. The Waitangi Tribunal launched an urgent inquiry into the matter. They formally declared that executing this policy based on a single minister's preference breached the Crown's core treaty principles of partnership and active protection. Dismissing expert consensus and ignoring the tribunal's recommendations does not yield a stable legal framework. It actively fractures the relationship between the Crown and Maori, replacing mutual obligation with unilateral control. A similar disconnect between evidence and policy appears in the justice system. The government claims that reinstating the 3 strikes law and capping sentence discounts at 40% are necessary, practical reforms to restore law and order. Maori make up 17% of Aotearoa, yet constitute over half the male and 60% of the female prison population. The Ministry of Justice severely warned that bringing back 3 strikes guarantees disproportionate sentences. Historically, 81% of those caught were Maori. Enacting policies that officials mathematically guarantee will accelerate a colonial prison conveyor belt is not about reducing community harm. It takes a crisis of systemic overrepresentation and leverages it as a political talking point. Beyond the courts, Goldsmith's 11 portfolios also give him control over the media landscape and human rights infrastructure, the exact institutions designed to hold government power in check. He moved to disestablish the Broadcasting Standards Authority, the only statutory media watchdog empowered to enforce standards against harmful and racist broadcast content, opting instead to leave the industry to self-regulation. At the same time, the government installed its preferred candidate as the Chief Human Rights Commissioner. They pushed this appointment through by overriding the formal recommendation of a retired Supreme Court judge. The High Court reviewed the process and explicitly ruled the appointment unlawful. The minister's response to a judge confirming his government broke the law was a dismissive shrug. Dismantling a statutory media watchdog, illegally stacking the Human Rights Commission, removes the guardrails protecting marginalized communities. It strips away the mechanisms to challenge institutional racism and hate. These decisions align with a very specific worldview. Goldsmith, who sulls himself as a historian, has publicly argued that the trauma of colonization was, quote, on balance, a net positive for Maori because it introduced Pākehā law and literacy. That colonial ledger sits in direct opposition to the indigenous framework of tikanga. Tikanga is heavily focused on kaupapa and whananatanga. It is about relationships and taking action to restore balance after harm has occurred. When the Crown signs a treaty, it makes a relational commitment. Taking that commitment and forcing it into a punitive, rigid corporate framework violates the very balance Tikanga seeks to maintain. In a modern political context, rangatiratanga, self-determination, means the community has the power and the responsibility to support its own truth-tellers, especially when the state obfuscates the impact of its policies. When an unelected official uses 11 ministerial crowns to rewrite the laws, expand the prisons, and silence the watchdogs under the guise of balance, accountability cannot wait for the next election cycle. It requires citizens to step up, look at the evidence, and relentlessly follow the receipts.